What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Bear With Me with Robert Schmitz and now Rashab Sikri. I am getting that right, Rashab?
Yes, sir.
Thank God.
Right.
You know what? I want to make absolutely certain every time I get the chance that I get somebody's name right, and making like that's how you got to do it. All right, so Bears lose another knife in the heart game. So many close games, Rashab. I
Right.
mean, for as many people told
6.
us in June as it would be impossible for the Bears to somehow play well on offense and lose a bunch of games, here we are. Before we get started with the podcast, how are you feeling about the season in general?
I'm feeling good still about the season in general because obviously what I wanted to see this year was growth from Justin Fields, and we have seen that for sure. Like he's been playing better for the most part down the stretch last couple months or last month I should say. And obviously Fields is what we all care about. Like the rest of the team is going to be overhauled in the offseason. So overall I'm still feeling fine. We have a top draft pick now coming up, which I'm excited about, but I'm not necessarily feeling good right now about how the game ended because Fields might have gotten hurt, and I'm not sure how long he's going to be out or if like he's even going to be here for the rest of the year now. So that's obviously a bummer right now.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask something ridiculous before we get started. Like this is the hottest take I'll probably ask you about. Okay, so friend of mine, Mason West, who's on our network, is predicting it's an AC joint sprain, which by no
Dang.
means is a good thing. What that would suggest is it would be his non-throwing shoulder. It's a sprain, not a tear. It's not some kind of collarbone injury or something, but it could mean that he's out for 4 to 6 weeks. So let me ask you this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Based on what you think about the opinion or like about the team right now, if Fields is done for the year, and that's
Mhm.
because of medical shutdown, not
Yeah.
because we don't believe in him.
Right.
Is there anything that you wanted to see that you didn't get to see that realistically you think he's going to miss? Or do you think that potentially putting him on ice, letting somebody else take the hits, letting him develop within an offense over the offseason that adds pieces could be
Mhm.
better for him? I mean, you tell me.
Probably the second option, right? Because we have seen some high level throws from Fields this year. We've seen high level running ability. Obviously, we have not seen consistently, having a good passing offense this year. So that's one thing. Obviously, I would have liked to see this year, but we knew entering this year we were probably not going to have a good passing offense, right? Because our pass blockers up front aren't really consistent. They're not known as being good pass blockers. We have a good run blocking offensive line. Definitely not a good pass blocking offensive line like we saw today. The weapons obviously could be improved. So I think the main thing I would have liked to see is obviously a higher, passing performance, higher passing stats. But we also saw like the bits and flashes of him passing the football today, right? Like he made a bunch of high level throws on third down with his arm, even though he was running around a little bit. He was mainly using his arm to get those first down conversions. So we're probably not missing too much given how bad the roster is this year, but I would have liked to see him, maybe beat the Packers later this year, which probably is not going to happen now given how bad our defense is, given how he's injured now too, but I'm still feeling pretty optimistic about the future, at this point in time.
Oh yeah. I mean, like, look, Rashab, you've come on the right podcast if you want to be positive. I am just I really try to
Yeah.
to level it set so that if we're mad,
Oh yeah.
then that must mean something. Because we don't like I try not to get look, if you asked me coming into this game, oh, the Bears lose by 7, they lose 24-31. Am I really shocked? No. Like it means that the Bears had an ever so slightly low offensive output compared to what they've done. But I
Mhm.
mean, I'm not going to cry over 24 points, turnover assisted or not. It used to take an act of God to score 24 points on this team.
Right.
So it's not something that I'm going to cry too hard over. And obviously it sucks that Fields is hurt, but if it's not an injury that's going to linger with him, and that's a big if, every injury is, but maybe moreover, like taking a step back, Fields took a ton of hits today, Rashab. Like this whole quarterback designed run thing is hitting the phase that I know people like me that weren't fans of where it was going in the first place were worried about. Not Fields gets hurt. That's a silly one to talk about, but just taking hits. You can't do what you did against Miami, where you run for almost 175 yards without getting hit forever. Eventually, teams are going to start putting the guys around you to at least tag you when you get 5 yards and make you earn it. Now, you know who went through this before, Rashab? Deshaun Watson, Lamar
Mhm.
Jackson, Russell Wilson. They all had a phase in their career where they took way too many hits. Everybody assumed that they were going to leave the league within 5 years because they were taking too many hits. Dak Prescott did the same thing, as a matter of fact. And then they cleaned their game up. They played a little bit more from the pocket. They realized what they could, what they couldn't do, and started calculating within every risk. But I'll tell you what, man. Look, I am by no means this could be construed as the most negative thing I could possibly say. Behind this offensive line, between Fields's, let's call it what it is, between Fields's general reticence to throw the ball into a tight window and the offensive line's inability to hold a pocket for 2.5 seconds, you know what? If he's getting put on ice for a little while, I don't think I'm that upset. This offensive line plus Justin Fields is a bad combination that is creating a ton of hits, even in the pocket, and it's messy
Definitely.
back there. You know what I mean?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think we had 5 sacks today, which the Falcons were, I think, bottom of the league in terms of pressure percentage and like sacks that they got. So I was thinking our offensive line might actually have like a good day today, like for the first time in a long time against a defense that's bad, but that clearly was not the case. And obviously, like you said, some of that is Justin Fields. Not maybe wanting to throw into tight windows or sometimes holding onto the football a little bit too long. But with the better,
Oh
with
yeah.
better weapons, I don't think that would have been the case, or with a better pass blocking offensive line. Like at Ohio State, he was one of the most accurate passers in all of college
Yep.
football. I think he was actually a better passer than Lamar Jackson or Deshaun Watson, even
hmm
coming out of college. So we know he can do that. The question is how fast can he convert that to the NFL level, and if the Bears are going to offer him the opportunity to do that on this current team, which probably is not going to happen this year.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's not clear, man, I agree with you. I just think coming out and being another voice saying it's all the offensive line's fault and everybody sucks and screw Luke Getzey takes away the fact that when
Yeah.
if you theoretically put, I'll pick two names that are very familiar to Bears fans, but they're also some of the best of the league at what I'm about to talk about. Andy Dalton and Nick Foles are really good at getting rid of the ball so wildly early that it can make a really bad offensive line, looking at you 2021, look pretty good just because the ball comes out of his hands. That's not really Fields' thing. You know what I mean?
I got
Um,
you.
but it's going to be interesting to see what happens from here. Let me shoot out a quick text message. But let's get rolling. You ready to record a podcast?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So, 3, 2, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Bear With Me, a Chicago Bears podcast hosted by yours truly, Robert Schmitz, right here on the Windy City Gridiron podcasting channel. And I got a treat for you today as we are here live with the Windy City Productions, Rishab Sikri, breaking down the Bears' latest crushing loss as they fall to 3-8 now against the Atlanta Falcons in the Georgia Dome, 24-31. Rishab, what are your initial thoughts on the game before we start digging into specific topics?
Yeah, so initial thoughts, obviously a bad loss. A loss that most people probably expected though, because at this point we're not really a good football team. We're losing all these games by close margins. Our defense is not that good this year, so we kind of expected a loss. So to see the offense still do well for the most part, I like that. Obviously, I like seeing us score 24 points, but the ending of this game, I obviously did not like because we'll talk about this probably later in the podcast. But whatever Luke Getsy did at the end there, I was not a huge fan of, and probably running Justin Fields into the ground a little bit too much contributed to his injury at the end of this game. So not a good ending, but for the most part, still a pretty good game for the offense, right?
Well, we can, yeah, you know what? You're right. Let's get to play calling a little bit later. Why not? But
Sure.
overall, I mean, we said this in the pre-show. This Chicago Bears organization used to take a miracle. Somebody had to wish upon a star to score 24 points in a real football game. So today, while things looked a little bit more normal, it took 2 turnovers, both fumbles, to assist the Bears on their way to 24 points. All the same, it's a 5th game in a row over 20 points and an average over the last 5 weeks of, I mean, probably well in the high 20s. So the real, I guess you could say, grown here. I don't know about you, Rishab. I feel like this Chicago Bears team really missed Khalil Herbert. And I do kind of feel like they
Definitely.
ham-fisted the Justin Fields runs a little bit.
Oh,
Normally, Justin Fields running the ball has been a bit more of a changeup. I mean, envision baseball. I know you talk a lot about it's White Sox, or are you Cubs?
I'm a
Uh,
White Sox guy.
I wanted to make sure I had that right. That's
Upside.
another don't say the wrong thing in Chicago. I
Yeah.
get that. But so this is like a fastball pitcher suddenly throwing his changeup 60% of the time. You can't do that. And Justin Fields running power runs to the right and to the left, the one where he runs almost all the way to the sideline and cuts up the field. I mean,
Mhm.
it worked for a touchdown, and that's great. But he took 5
Yeah.
shots that he just did not need to take and hadn't been
Yeah.
taking over the last couple weeks. Today, I feel like Atlanta's Dean Pease did a phenomenal job taking a team with a horrible secondary and a relatively okay defensive line, though it's mostly just Grady Jarrett, and doing a great job of fencing Justin Fields into the pocket as much as he could. And hey, Rashab, even there, Justin Fields made some plays that had Falcons players spinning. I mean, there was
Mhm.
in particular a third down
Third
scramble. I
down.
remember it must have been 3rd and 8, where they had the spy they wanted. Fields leaked out and just made his guy miss out of absolutely nowhere to convert the third down and get down for a hit. Now, is his pocket passing a work in progress? Of course it is, right? But you can still see some of that playmaking ability. And if anything, maybe the most positive thing I can come away from this game, this was a real heat check to Luke Getsy and his Justin Fields offense, because a lot of the
Mhm.
things that had been working against Dallas, where Dan Quinn, I don't think called a very good game, against Miami, where they didn't exactly change up much to try to stop them, Dean Pease came to this game with the most anti Justin Fields game plan possible. And I actually think we saw flashes of it developing Justin Fields later in the game as he started deliberately hanging as long in the pocket as he could, creating that third down incompletion, creating that defensive holding, and helping the Bears score a touchdown. So this could be a long-term good game for the Bears, because it
Mhm.
means let's just stop acting like Justin Fields runs are the ticket to a Super Bowl, even though in the moment it totally hurts. You know what I mean?
Totally agree with you. I mean, we saw, like you mentioned, like multiple times on third down, he made the play with his arm, especially down the stretch. I mean, he bought time with his legs to like run around, make guys miss. There was that ball to I think it was Montgomery down the sideline, which that was a dime ball, dude. That was on the move. He led Montgomery down the field right in his hands. I was like, oh my God, that was an insane throw. He also had another conversion on like I think it also might have been to Monty where it was like only a couple yards gain, but he had to run from one side of the field to the other side of the field to the other side of the field. I think he ran like 30 yards on that play. Wasn't a big conversion down the field, but it did move the chains, obviously. So he is making plays with his arm right now more than he did in the earlier games. But like you mentioned, Dean Pease did a really good job of keeping him mostly in the pocket and not enabling him to leave the pocket and run with the football. And the last 3-4 games, Fields' legs have been like a major reason why we've been able to move the football. And today he still had like 80 yards or something. He might have had like 90 yards or whatever it was on the ground, but it wasn't like as dominant of a rushing performance as we saw, the last 2 games, which is also why the Bears struggled. So yeah, long term, I mean, this could end up helping the Bears out, right? Because we need to see Fields eventually develop as a passer for the long term, because he can't just keep on running for 140 plus yards every single game on the ground. But I again think we don't have probably the right personnel to do that right now, and also Fields still has struggles as a passer overall, so he has to improve, obviously, going on the stretch too.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all going to be a work in progress. But if anything, Rashab, this is another great game to where we can point. It's easy to look at the box score and say, okay, the Bears ran for 160 yards. Why on earth are we not talking about the fact that Justin Fields didn't lead the team more as a passer? But you got to remember, if you take out Justin Fields running the football, the Bears carried it 25 times for 75 yards. It doesn't take a
Yeah.
mathematician to point out that's 3 yards per carry. And in particular, Tristan Ebner with 6 carries for 8 yards, Rashab, was a
Right.
drive killer on some of those pitch plays where the
Oh
Bears
yeah.
got absolutely nothing going. Look, it's not as simple. I know, I'm sure I sound like a homer within this. It's not me trying to say, oh, none of this is Justin Fields' fault and he has nowhere to grow. It's more that in a post game podcast where, Rashab, we've now gone from, oh gosh, what were we when we got our third win? We beat the Patriots, right? So we've
Mhm.
now gone 4 weeks in a row with a fun game and also a loss. We've done this podcast a lot, right?
Right.
And I can't help but feel like while Fields took 5 sacks and just eyeballing it, 2 of them were immediately, like definitely Fields, you did not have to take that sack. There
Yeah.
were the other three are major problems. I mean, the Bears are calling screens and taking sacks. The Bears are calling 3rd and 19 passes, missing a stunt up front, and taking a sack within 2.5 seconds. Like, there are some serious, serious question marks all across this team's roster that we're not going to fix them by the end of the year. If anything, Rashab, a game like this where you have to, or where the Bears showed, I don't know, more of the same, right? It's not like this
Mhm.
defense looks categorically different, and it won't until they add new players. It's not like this offense looked categorically different. And if anything, it was, I don't know, almost nice to see the problems come to roost and how the Bears were going to go ahead and get over those humps because somebody was going to challenge them like this eventually, right? And
Mhm.
I mean, really, the only downside is Fields did not look too healthy there at the end, did he? Like, what do
Yeah.
you think of that?
I don't know. So the entire last week sequence, I was kind of not a fan of Luke Getsy because obviously Fields running with the football has worked for the majority of the season, but the drive before that last drive, Fields was making plays with his arms. So like I don't want to say that you should have maybe only passed the football and like drop back and made it like an obvious passing play, but Fields running with the football twice in a row, especially after he got injured after the first play, right? Like the first run, he got injured. He was like kind of limping a little bit. He was holding his arm a little bit. And after that, Getsy calls another run, right? Which that didn't really make sense to me. And then obviously after that, Fields throws a pick, which was a little bit high. Which I wasn't sure if that was intended for Mooney or for Monty. People on Twitter were saying it was maybe intended for Mooney, but whatever the case was, that was a high ball. Ended up being a pick. So obviously not a good ending sequence for Fields. But I also have questions about Luke Getsy and what his plan is for Justin Fields because I feel like that was not the right call, right? Running after he already got hit. Like, did he know that Fields was hurt there? I think he should have, right? Like, what do
I
you think?
You would think so. I mean,
Yeah,
certainly, look, if you ask a football player, can you go back in the game? What
right.
answer are you expecting if you don't think he's going to look you in the eyes and say, "Of course I can, coach"? Like that, you wouldn't be a football player trying to. I mean, look at what's going on in Miami with Tua Tagovailoa.
Mhm.
I mean, come
Oh
on,
yeah,
Rashad. You think he was healthy when he started
definitely
getting
not.
back in the game? He just made a professional business decision that no,
Yeah.
you can't come out right now, and he may be on his way to multi-million-dollar contract because of it. The point is, I agree with you. I think he looked hurt, but even more than that, like, sure, 2 quarterback runs at the end is a clear and obvious head scratcher, but let's go back a little bit further, Rashab. The Bears got to the 20-ish yard line. They're in the red zone, right? They're down 7 points. Byron Pringle holds 1st and 20. What's the first play call? A quarterback run, which got next to nothing. 2nd and 16. What's the play call? A direct handoff, no option whatsoever, straight up what looked like the left side C gap. They get 4 yards. 3rd and 12. Fields has to work magic to create a conversion because the original play call was just flat out not there. And then what do they do on the play calls after that? Do you remember, Rashab?
So this was at the end of the
This was on the goal line
on the goal
on what
line.
ended up being Montgomery's rushing touchdown. Do you remember?
Um, Trying to think. Right,
They
you can
ran
just.
it up the left side B gap, and then they
Oh
ran
yeah,
it
yeah,
up the left side B gap again, so
yeah.
that Fields had a 3rd and 5 to
Oh
try to
yeah.
create a touchdown, which he ended
Mhm.
up creating the defensive holding call on.
Mm.
Look, I get it that there is like plenty of you could beg the question on, well, the Bears have been running the ball to set up everything so far, why would they stop? Well, in 1st and 20, maybe running the ball isn't the answer. Maybe 2nd and long
Yeah.
isn't always a running down. Like, I get
Mhm.
it. I'm only saying it because it didn't work, but it didn't work at all, and it hadn't worked all game. I mean, there's
Right.
a point where you're setting your quarterback up to fail when
Oh
you're
yeah, for sure.
exclusively running the ball and handing him the toughest conversions in football, which the general NFL only converts about 38 to 42% of the time. Maybe that's like the all down, that's like the all down and distance 3rd down conversion rate, for crying out loud. So it's probably an overestimation. And instead, you're saying, okay, Fields, go get this one for me and go get the next one too. Did Fields throw a bad ball in the interception? Yeah. Like, there are going to be people that are going to just tell you that ball hit Dave Montgomery in the hands. Yeah, at the top of his catching range. I get it.
Mhm.
But it was also pressure, or there was pressure up the middle that forced him backwards. He had a sprained shoulder by the sounds of it, or it potentially sprained shoulder. We don't actually know what it is. He threw it off his back foot. The ball ended up high. I've seen the movie before. There's a point where you say to yourself, why did we do what we did? on first and second down? Why did we make some of the situational choices we did at the end? And like,
Yeah.
I'm never going to suggest they did it on purpose, but it was certainly questionable.
Right, and it's also like, what other choice do we have? Like, our drop back passing game is not that good this year, so maybe
No.
that also plays into it, right? Like, what else can Luke Getsy do? But you would like to see them like, what happened to Chase Claypool in this game? Chase Claypool has still not been involved in this offense whatsoever in like week 3 now, and I know that he still has a lot of the playbook to learn. He's still learning his assignments and everything on the field, but he's been like a non-factor for 3 weeks in a row. And like you would think that even just throwing a deep shots to him, like on a one-on-one or something, like he would eventually do something with that. But we don't even give Chase Claypool the opportunity to do anything in these games. So that also kind of, concerns me a little bit, his usage of Chase Claypool.
Mhm.
But he also just got here, so I'm not gonna like go crazy about that. And I think that eventually Chase Claypool is gonna be fine in this offense. But right now, that's a big, like, the entire passing game is just not there right now. Like, we cannot
Oh
pass
yeah.
when we have to pass.
And I mean, Rishab, it's also worth mentioning that this was a perfect game to demonstrate the potential negative of Justin Fields turning into a ground-based superstar, right? Because I'm sure you saw this, but on some of the rollouts that the Bears have, of which they must be leading the league in the rollouts that they're calling, they call them all the time. Fields seemed to have a tight window throw available to him, but instead of throwing the ball, he'd run it for sometimes it was as few as 2 yards. Oftentimes it was about 5 or 6, usually nothing crazy. And some of them even on like first and 15, first and 20 situations where 6 yards wasn't enough. But the point is, right now, Justin Fields feels most comfortable running the ball. Shocker. He just set the single game rushing record 2 weeks ago. So it can't be that crazy. But moreover, Rashab, a standard quarterback, I mean, we mentioned Tua Tagovailoa, Andy Dalton, Nick Foles. Like, take your standard NFL quarterback. They don't have the wheels to pick up 2 yards on some of these plays, and they will practice throwing these balls into tight windows. I really am thankful to Dean Pease and the Falcons because eventually a team was going to force you to throw the throws that you need or to make those throws one way or another. And this was a nice reminder of, I mean, I remember in particular, there was a play on what looked like the right side where it might have been the left. I can't remember, where Chase Claypool looked to be a few steps open. And if Fields had checked it down to Claypool, Claypool would have picked up the 7 yards that Fields also picked up. It was a wash either way, right? But Fields learning to not trust throwing the ball and instead run the ball is something he's got to undo eventually. You know what I mean? We
Right.
can't just look like this forever, right?
Yeah, he's gone into a lot of bad habits, out of necessity probably on this offense
Right.
because he has to run, right? Because we don't have many other ways to make plays. And yes, he's still developing as a passer, but he also, I mean, like you mentioned, like this may have long-term impacts that might not be good because eventually you need him to be a pocket passer that can make throws from the pocket. And right now, he's struggling a little bit there, partly because of personnel and partly because of his own doing too. And I do question like long-term what the impact is of this because right now it's not really looking good, but he's also getting better still overall. Like you still saw him make some throws on third down, like down the field, and like obviously that throw to Monty that I talked about. So he is getting better in some areas, but is it enough? Like you wonder, obviously, right?
Oh, of course. I mean, Rashab, let's not over dramatize everything, right? Not that you did, just that I know that there are some people, they hear analysts say this throw wasn't very good, and they assume that you've got to carry that opinion all the way to, I think this quarterback sucks. You know what I mean? That's just
Mm,
not the case. I
right.
personally think that throws like he had to Montgomery, like that throw was a dime, and it was
That was
entirely
amazing. Yeah.
created outside the structure of a play. The third
Mhm.
down conversion he had to ESB, that was clear change over the way that he had been playing in the first half. In the first half, he was doing what he started doing about 3 weeks ago, playing quick. If it's not there, just run it. And Atlanta was making them pay to some extent. I mean, obviously they scored 17 points, but you get it, right? In this game, Fields still ends up sure. Like I could play the combined yardage argument. He throws for he accounts quote unquote for about 240, 2 scores and an interception. But moreover, by the end of the game, we started seeing him attempt to create pocket passes that I think will net result in him being a better player going forward. The
Mhm.
problem is, okay, let's just cut straight to the chase, right, Rashab? If the Bears have to put Fields on the shelf for a couple weeks to rehab whatever injury is going on, so long as that injury isn't long term, I don't see anything specific right now within this Bears team that makes me want to see Fields play more snaps behind this offensive line and more snaps with this receiver core and more snaps with an offense that hasn't figured it out yet. Fields has shown me enough to give him certainly an extra year, certainly to invest in a team around him. And if the end result becomes pack it in, keep as many people healthy, and potentially juice your draft position,
Mhm.
then if that means putting Fields on the or like on the bench, or not on the bench, you call it IR, right?
Right.
And going in that direction, I would completely understand why the Bears would do it because Fields is not auditioning to me anymore, and I'm perfectly
Oh,
fine
yeah.
saying that.
Yeah, I think even Ryan Poles talked about that, right? Like he talked about how many plays Fields has been making, how he's been looking really electric, and obviously his word doesn't always mean everything, right? Like a GM can say anything and then still do something different in the offseason. But I do think, like you mentioned, Ryan Poles is all in on Justin Fields at this point in time, and he's getting at least another year next year to prove what he actually has. And I would still like to see him play, obviously, because I am a Bears fan. I want to see
Because we
Justin.
like it.
Yeah, we like it. I mean, it makes Sundays fun, and it's not going to be fun to watch the Bears on Sundays if Justin Fields is not there. Like, I do not want to watch Trevor Simeon drop back and pass the ball like 30 plus times a game. I mean, he might have like 200 plus passing yards because he's going to pass a lot more than Fields is, but he's also not going to create those wow running plays that Fields does. So it's not going to be an exciting brand of football, and we're probably going to lose those games regardless. But like you mentioned, the draft position is a big thing because, dude, if we're sitting at top 5 in the draft this year with all the quarterbacks up there, we could trade back, get a haul, get maybe future picks too. So the long-term team building could still be like fine, especially after losing these games. Like it hurts right now, but long term there could be some serious impact, serious positive impact from losing these games. But
Yep.
it all comes down to like how healthy is Fields, because if he is actually healthy, I would like to see him out there. Obviously, like we all would, because he can still get better in these games, even if he's not, passing as much as we would like. If the if the team around him is not as good as it can be, he's still learning something from these games, from attempting to make these comebacks, which are not always happening. And eventually you would think that, one of these comebacks is going to happen down the stretch. But I don't know, man. Like I would also be okay with them sitting out just because we know our season is not going anywhere. We're not going to make the playoffs, obviously, at 3-8, and we need a better team around Fields. So I'll be
Right.
happy either way. I think we've seen enough from Fields, but
Exactly.
yeah.
I can't emphasize it. I completely agree with that. It's not I'm pushing for the Bears to shelf Justin Fields. It's more that if that's the direction they go, I get it because it would be honestly, Rashab, I don't think Bears fans talk enough about the fact that for as much as a lot of people wanted to push this narrative that the Bears had a shot to go to the playoffs in the offseason, this is the cheapest team in football, the cheapest offense, the second cheapest defense by just a couple million, both spending under $70 million, while other units are spending as many as $100 million, if not 120, on different pieces of their offense or defense. No team is spending that much on both, and you get that. But what that means is that this was a team that had very low expectations for itself. And if Ryan Poles sticks to that, that's a decision that they could make. I would understand it. I mean, you've seen this defense. Like I think we would both agree that if a Will Anderson or a Jalen Carter falls to them,
God.
that is a big difference maker for a defense that could desperately use some more meat up front. I mean, look, I hope Chase Claypool makes a bigger impact by the end of the season, like you're saying. I mean, I hope I didn't brush you off when you mentioned that because you're
No.
100% right. Like
Yeah.
not seeing number 10 doing much of anything, like seeing number 10, in fact, look more or less like Marquise Goodwin, real bummer, given that we spent a second round pick on it. I also feel like before we move off of Fields, I can't not mention how disappointing it was to see him miss Darnell Mooney wide open deep. It's
Yeah.
such a weird play because it's not like he overthrew him by 5 to 10 yards, though, missing by a little and missing by a lot net you the same thing, an incompletion and a blown opportunity. But that is a play that, of course, you want to see him make that throw. I'd probably want him to put a little more. If I was going to try to critique it properly, I would want to see him put a little more air under it because
Mhm.
Mooney won that rep so convincingly that if you give your guy a better chance at making an attempt at the ball instead of trying to
Right.
make the perfect low trajectory throw that if you miss him, you will miss him versus like it didn't really leave much a chance for Mooney to run under it, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. Like he can't
I got
adjust to
you.
that. It
Yeah.
either hits him or it doesn't, and it didn't. But I also can't help but think, man, that some of those plays come down to the fact that the Bears, what do you think? They throw one of those a game at this point? Like
Yeah.
one of those every
I mean,
2 games, one of those every 3 games.
dude, I mean, under Matt Nagy, as much as we criticize him, in that game against the Lions, we threw probably like 4 or 5 deep shots down the field to Mooney. And obviously, I'm not trying to say that Nagy was a better play caller than Luke Getz, or yeah, than Luke Getzey is, but I'm just saying that it's kind of a different offense right now. Like it's much more of a running offense, and we barely take shots down the field. Which, if you barely take shots on the field, how are you going to complete these passes? Like we've seen him throw deep to Mooney so many times in his career, and obviously this year it's not been as frequently, but he has the ability to do that. It sucked that he missed that. And that would have been, I mean, that would have been a game changing play if he made it. Obviously, it would have been up like 14-0 at that point. So,
Absolutely. And they ended up punting it. So, which
yeah,
obviously they like recovered the fumble. That rarely happens. But
right.
it's more to say that you never know in football games when the moment is that you not that you lost the game, right? But
Mhm.
which blown opportunities in the first quarter are going to haunt you in the fourth. And that was one you kind of knew it at the time. But I mean, at the same time, man, Jared Goff and the Lions attempt more deep throws in one game than sometimes it feels like the Bears have attempted all season. Tua Tagovailoa has so much practice of like throwing deep to Tyreek Hill that Tyreek makes just about every one of Tua's throws look perfectly fine and catchable because he's so accustomed to adjusting for them. I mean, that's not to say that all of Tua's throws are bad. That's just like taking Twitter and running with it.
Mhm.
You've watched a Dolphins game before, right?
A bunch, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like some of them are underthrows, and Tyreek goes back and gets them. Some of them are wayward inside. Tyreek cuts inside and gets them. Like a good receiver, especially a good receiver that's really tuned up to how his quarterback throws the football, will go and make those throws look good. And it's not to say that, oh, this field or this throw should have been made look good. Like, actually, that's the problem that I think I have with that Justin Fields throw. It had to be perfect or it didn't work. And if it had smoked Mooney in the hands, everybody
Mm.
would have gone, wow,
Yeah.
what a play. And I would
Yeah,
have been one of them, right?
right, for
But
sure.
because Mooney beat his guy so cleanly, I would hope that the next time they attempt it, Fields gives Mooney a little bit more of a chance at something outside the sidelines so that
Mm.
if Mooney wins really well, he can, or like, then great. He'll be all alone catching that pass out there. But if it's still tight, Mooney can still adjust to and compete for that ball anyways, instead of just praying you're so perfectly accurate
Mhm.
that I'm going to hit it. You know what I
Right.
mean?
It was also like a 60-yard pass, I think, down the
Right.
field. It might have been like 50 plus yards, which if you're asking your quarterback to make a throw that far, like obviously only certain quarterbacks can throw that far. I mean, I'm sure everyone can throw that far, but like to be that precisely accurate with
Yeah.
it, like you mentioned, you have to put more air on the ball probably to give your receiver a better chance of making a play there. But like I still think, Fields obviously as a deep ball passer is going to be fine. It's just that like that one play obviously did not work out. So that was definitely a real bummer because that would have probably changed the momentum of that game for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean,
100%.
even after we went up like 14 to, I think it was like 17-7, right? Like I thought the Bears would have a really good chance of winning this game, but
Yep.
then Cordero Patterson goes back for the 100+ yard touchdown or something, which I love Cordero Patterson, but that hurt. That definitely hurt.
Of course it hurt. I mean, for
Yeah,
crying out loud. It's
yeah.
fun seeing him succeed. Former Bear
Oh yeah.
embody I don't know if he embodies the Chicago Bears, but he was a fun piece of
Oh,
the
he
Matt
definitely
Nagy era.
does.
We
Yeah.
also got your I feel like this game, ironically, was the good, the bad, and the ugly of Cordero Patterson. You had that sweet
Yeah.
kickoff return touchdown as well as a couple other runs. You had a nasty fumble off of what should have been a basic play. And you also had another one of those like, okay, they lined up Cordero Patterson out wide, they couldn't possibly be running a screen, right? And Kyler Gordon bit down and made the play. Like
Yeah.
it was very goofy from 84, who giveth and tooketh away. But what were your thoughts on this Bears defense, which obviously has had much worse days over the last two
Yeah.
weeks, but all the same, when they needed to make a stop, it was very easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's still not a good defense. As we know, the defensive line still has a lot of issues up there. We could not really get a stop down the stretch. We did get a stop at the end when we got the stop there and then they kicked the field goal, obviously. So overall, we still lack talent in the defensive line. Our cornerbacks still are really young. Especially Kyler Gordon. Like he in the first half, he made a couple mistakes, but he bounced back in the second half with some really nice tackles. Back-to-back tackles actually to basically get the stop there. So I think that overall, we did get the turnover in the first half, which was nice because we did not get any turnovers in the last two games, I think, combined. So we had like two, I think, in this game, one on special teams, one um, on defense. So turning the ball over was nice. They did play better in this game, like you mentioned, in previous games, but still, if you need this defense to get a stop down the stretch, they are not going to be able to do that most likely. And obviously allowing, how many do we allow? 27 to a Falcons offense that struggled big time against the Panthers last Thursday night. That's still not good enough, right? So
No.
I'm not sure what your thoughts are on like Alan Williams right now, because I know he blitzed a shit ton in the first half, which didn't really work out. Like Mariota got the ball off super fast for some big completions. In the second half, it was a little bit more conservative, I would say. But like, what do you think about Alan Williams overall? Because I know some people on Twitter online are like kind of losing their mind about him.
So look, I'm not about to try to tell you. You ask me, I'm not about to try to tell you that I love this Bears scheme. Like I much prefer the Fangio scheme and all the stuff that basically relies on let's stop the pass first and get to the run when we can. But next to no scheme is going to look good with the talent that the Bears have on defense. And unfortunately, I am going to have to lump Kyler Gordon into that. Like, can he take a step forward? Absolutely. Right now, as a cover corner, he doesn't look like a player that you're trying to win because of. Does that make sense? You're
Oh
trying
yeah.
to win with him or sometimes win in spite of him because he's
Mhm.
making some plays. Duke Shelley could bite down and make a tackle too. And we
Yeah.
ran him out of town. So
Yeah.
I want to try to speak fairly when it comes to these corners. Jaquan Brisker seems to be coming along much stronger than I think Kyler Gordon is. And that's not just, I saw him make some tackles on the broadcast and man, I like the fact that he wears number 9. Like Jaquan Brisker is making some plays in coverage, is sticky, is rotating, and is part of the reason the Bears defense is getting any stops at all. Kyler Gordon's got a ways to go. But that said, Rashab, I mean, any team or most teams at the very least have at least one Grady Jarrett on the defensive line, like wherever it is, right? It doesn't have to be a defensive tackle. It could be an edge rusher, like a problem. You know what I mean? The
Mhm.
Bears' problem at the moment is Justin Jones, who on some teams would not start. So there is a real issue when you're playing. I like Travis Gibson and Dominique Robinson. I
Mhm.
don't like them as starting NFL edge rushers, which is
Oh yeah.
normally a position that you need a top 20 pick, period. Not just first rounder. Like you draft Drake London in the second, or to use the Falcons example, Arnold Ebikite in the second rounder. You're hoping he develops into a starting edge rusher and probably an edge two at that. You know what I mean? The
Mhm.
Bears so lack talent right
Oh
now
yeah,
that
for sure.
okay, so I had Sanborn fever last week.
Yeah.
This game calms you down just a little bit. Not because you think that Sanborn sucks or something like that, but because speedier backs on Atlanta attacked Sanborn's lateral movement much more than I thought like the Lions did, where they just leaned into allowing Sanborn to walk into the hole and blow him up.
Mhm.
And Sanborn played really well, which was awesome. I think Sanborn looks like a great depth piece going forward. The Bears are finding some great depth players, Rashab, but to kill Alan Williams because he's trying to make a he basically got $1 at the dollar store and got told make me a 3-star meal.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
not
yeah.
like we are asking that much. I get it. Not a 5-star meal, right?
Mhm.
But you can't really make a 3-star meal when you're dumpster diving for defensive line talent. And that's part of the reason that I was so, I mean, borderline obnoxious about how bad I thought the Bears defense was going to be. Because even when they had Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn, this defensive interior was always going to be an issue. And
Yeah.
when the Falcons were able to run the ball, which wasn't always, but it was enough, they were able to continue to grind out the points that they needed to ultimately put them over just by a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And like under Ryan Pace on the previous regime, we always had like good defensive linemen for the most part. Right? Like we had Eddie Goldman up there in the middle,
Yes.
who was always good against the run. We had Akeem Hicks, a monster, who's I think he's injured right now, so he's not really doing anything away from the Bears. But like he was a solid presence there. And right now we just do not have those guys on the D line to like push the pocket to get any sort of push up front. And that's enabling these quarterbacks to just like drop back and pass really well. Like even a guy like Marcus Mariota, who I think the Falcons were like ranked 31st in the NFL in terms of passing yards per game, right in
Mhm.
front of the Chicago Bears. And Mariota still had a decent amount of throws in this game that went for like positive yardage down the fields. And that's partly because we don't have the defensive line up front. Like even Matt Eberflus last year, he had guys like DeForest Buckner, like big, strong guys at the line of scrimmage, which we do not just have right now. So I think the first pick could easily be going to defensive lineman, like you mentioned, like Will Anderson, like Jalen Carter, because getting a guy like that would definitely change this entire defense, right? Because I still think
Hmm.
our secondary overall does have promise. Like Eddie Jackson has been playing really good for the most part this
Oh
year.
yeah,
Jaquan Brisker, like you mentioned, he's been coming along really good. Kyler Gordon, he's slipping up. Obviously, he's not developing as fast as like a Jaquan Brisker is, but as we know, corners in the NFL don't always, develop really fast right away. Like even a guy like, I don't know, Kyle Fuller, like he was not the best probably in his first year. So I'm still being patient with Kyler Gordon right now. I
of
still think our
course.
secondary has promise long term, but I'm more worried about our defensive line and the pass rush, obviously, because we cannot get pressure on the quarterback, even against the worst defensive lines in the NFL, or offensive lines, I should say.
Look, with a season like this, Rashad, there's no advantage to running a player like Kyler Gordon off, especially at a hard to learn position. I mean, look at number 85, Cole Kmet right now. He is living
Oh
his best life. I mean,
yeah.
it's
One
not
handed
as if
catch.
he yeah, it's not as if he had some crazy game today, but he made a play I wouldn't have dreamed of him making 2 years ago with that
Yeah.
wild one-handed catch to save a throw from Justin Fields that was off target. I mean, I don't think Justin Fields, not to circle back, like I'll touch on him, just worth mentioning. I don't think he was particularly accurate today, which is fine. Again, you're talking about a guy who right now is learning next to no normal pocket mechanics because every time he hits the back of his drop, he needs to already be looking for where to scramble, or generally speaking, his offense doesn't move. They are getting killed by man coverage right now. But within that, I feel like giving Kyler Gordon time, certainly as much of the season as he's able to play medically, yeah, why not? I mean, hopefully every single time he gets beaten is a precursor to him learning a lesson and getting that little bit better, especially within the offseason. But there's just no reason not to right now. I mean, at this stage of the season, like you said, I mean, is it fair to say playoffs are out of the question?
100%. I don't think we're doing anything this year.
I'll ask you this. You asked me about what I thought about Alan Williams. I will tell you that this was a game to me that made me stop worrying about Luke Getsy becoming a head coach candidate.
Yeah, oh,
Like
yeah.
to be clear, it's not
Yeah.
that means that I hate Luke Getsy. Like
Oh,
let's
yeah.
not. I think we flip flop a little too much on these coaches. To
Oh,
me, right
100%.
now, Alan Williams looks like what I would hope would be a defensive coach that never brings an atrocious game plan, but I don't know if I'm ever really expecting him to bring the perfect game plan either. Like a middle of the road, think of him as like a B. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Luke Getsy looks like he could be a star in the making, but he's young too, and he's showing his youthful warts. If anything, no matter who he's got at quarterback for the remainder of the year, obviously for health reasons, I invite him to try to scheme a Trevor
Yeah,
Simeon offense just for the
right?
sake of his own growth. I mean, there are pieces to this offense, like again, calling a quarterback run, seeing his quarterback go hurt and limp, probably getting a chance to talk to Justin Fields during that timeout, and then saying, "Got it, cool. How does the quarterback draw sound?"
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there are pieces to this
Yeah,
that
that
are
makes
like, what are we doing? Like, the Bears coaching staff, I think, has quite a way to grow at this stage, and
definitely, and
that's
they're all
okay.
yeah. A lot of them are first-time guys too, like Matt Eberflus is a first-time head coach, Luke Getsy is a first I believe is a first-time offensive coordinator, right? Or at least first-time, like,
Yep,
play caller in the NFL, so,
in the NFL, yes.
obviously yeah, I mean, obviously, even play callers have room to grow, even coaches have room to grow, like, they're not gonna be good right away. Like, we have young players on the team that we're expecting to, like, learn and grow over time. It's the same exact thing for these coaches, so they're not gonna be perfect right away. I did not think that Luke Getsy was going to leave this team regardless after this
Right.
year because I felt like he would have stayed for another year, no matter what. But after this game, and I don't want to overreact to just one game, but like throughout the entire year, there's been some inconsistencies in this offense that I don't know if you would want to give Luke Getsy a coaching job right now. I know he did get a head coaching interview with the Broncos, so he's already like on the radar right now. But I still think he's staying for next year. So
I think he's probably staying for 2 or 3 years.
yeah,
I mean,
it could be. Yeah.
worth remembering that like Brian Dable took 4 years in
Oh
Buffalo.
yeah.
And if at this point, let me put it this way, okay, right? I work for my day job in sales. And
Mhm.
so within that, Rashab, there's always somebody who's willing to pay a stupid price for something because specifically it's real estate. So if somebody wants to pay too much for a house, if somebody wanted to hire Getsy right now, it's not like I'm gonna stop them. Like, good for them, but that to me would be a ridiculous hire. right? Like I, as a fan of a team that needs a coach, would not be looking at Luke Getsy right now seriously. I mean, it would be a very similar hire. Do you remember how excited people got over John DeFilippo during the Bears coaching
Yeah.
cycle with Matt Nagy?
Oh, I was excited about that too. I was like,
Yeah,
hey, this
imagine
guy.
how that would have worked
Yeah,
out.
that would not have worked out well.
in
Think
the
he's
in
in
the
the
same way.
Arkansas right now or something.
Right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. I actually don't know where he is. But all that to say that, like, right now, Getsy's got plenty of time. I think the Bears have plenty of time. I
Mm,
do I can't help but think, Rashab, that there is a piece of this that comes down to I think all of us Bears fans are frustrated at seeing the losses. And because the game keeps working out one way or another to where Fields has the ball at the very end of the game, it
yeah,
continues to look as if there is a major problem with the Bears' inability to move the ball at the end or to win in general. But
right.
this is not a good football team. I mean, like,
Oh,
if
definitely,
you
yeah.
need to hear it from a Bears fan, I will say it and I will say it again. This team is not very good. And so whether it's an offensive line that Rashad, they can barely track a stunt, you know? Like there are
Mhm.
some basic offensive line coaching pieces that this team looks like they've never played together before, and some of them, I'm looking at you, Michael Schofield, look like they've never played at all. And so this team needs work. And the fact that they keep ending up in these games is borderline miraculous. I mean,
Right.
truly, if Trevor Simeon can lead this Bears offense to 24 points with a not a literally the same game plan, I don't want to see Trevor Simeon running the football like this. But whatever they wanted to call for him, if he could score
Yeah.
24 points with this Bears offense, I would actually like to see it. And it would change a lot of the way that I think plenty of us think. I mean, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah.
But I
Definitely.
doubt he can. This Bears
Same here,
offense would
yeah.
probably quickly go back to being the 15.5 point scorer that they
Oh,
were
yeah.
to open the season before Fields ripped the top off the offense. So this is a messy team. And messy teams are going to lose games. The fact that the Bears keep losing them close, to me, if anything, is a testament to things actually going the right way. You know what I mean? Because
For sure.
what
And
am
we
I going
always
to?
have, like, it's not only been, like, Justin Fields messing up at the end, like, it's been, like, Velus Jones fumbling, or it's been Emir Smith-Marsette, fumbling as well at the end. Like, there's been so many different people that have made mistakes at the end, so it's not, I know you're not saying it's only on the quarterback, but,
Of
like, other
course,
people, they may think it's on the quarterback, Justin Fields, and, like, he's not able to pass down the field in these crucial situations, which I don't think that's the case. In this game, yeah, he missed high to Dave Montgomery. That was a bad ball, but, like, that was honestly, like, one of the only times I've seen him be the, not the main reason, but, like, one major reasons why we didn't complete the comeback at the end, right? So
right? I mean, funnily enough, I would look at that and I would point to injury because
yeah, and he was
Fields,
injured too.
the
Yeah.
entire rest of the game, Fields would have rolled out to the right. I think it was the right, either that or the left. He would have rolled like once he got that pressure up the middle instead of throwing to Dave Montgomery, even if he probably should have gotten the ball to Montgomery just a little bit sooner. I mean, the whole thing, we are sitting in the middle of this horrible extremist argument, Rashab,
Yeah.
where one side goes, okay, you can't criticize Justin Fields for that. He's my guy. Like, how about you point the finger at everybody else? And then the other side says, oh, no, you don't understand. Fields sucks. And if they don't like draft somebody else, I'm never going to support the Bears ever again. And it's like, what if we could criticize the quarterback just a little bit and
Yeah.
say, while we've got some amazing throws that give us a lot of confidence for who he might be going forward, he's definitely still a work in progress, while also pointing out the fact that he's not sitting behind 5-second pockets and failing. Like this is a
Mhm.
guy, this is a guy who it does not have a healthy offensive system around him. I mean, they traded for a player and he has been categorically invisible for one reason or another. We
Yeah.
don't we don't know, right? And
For
whenever
sure.
I know I watch the all 22, I see a problem that I see Fields, I would say, rescue more plays than he creates problems for, but the creating problems is still there. And I mean,
Mhm.
they may never totally go away, as Josh Allen is showing us in Buffalo, that
Yeah.
sometimes you give and sometimes you take away when you
Oh, yeah.
are the offense, right?
For
But
sure. Yeah.
all the same, like we got to take a deep breath. This is a year I expected the Bears to get blown out a lot more. And instead, they keep losing one score games. Here, I got the score wrong almost this entire podcast. I was thinking it was a 31-24 game for some reason. It's
Yeah.
24-27. They lost by 3 in somebody
Yeah.
else's house.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it's
It's not
that's
that bad.
I don't know. It's not that bad.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
for what our team is right now, it's obviously not that bad because, like you mentioned, like no Bears fan really expected playoffs this year. The most optimistic ones maybe expected like 8 or 9 wins at the most, which is obviously not going to happen now. But with how bad our talent is on the team right now, with how young the team is too, with how we have not spent any money at all, we're like top of the NFL in dead cap hit. I think we have like a 90 million dead cap hit or something, like some insane number up there. So like this team was not expected to win. They are not winning, but they're also barely losing, which I think that's a big deal, right? Because next year, with a better defensive line, with a better team around Fields, these could be turning into wins, you would hope.
Yep, absolutely. But so you tell me at the end of the day, what are your final thoughts on the now 3-8 Bears going into next week's game against? I gotta look it up. Do you know off the top of
Jets,
your
I
head?
think. I think it's the Jets.
It is the Jets as they take
Zach
on
Wilson, yeah.
the other group or
Another
like another
struggling
one of those
quarterback.
quarterbacks.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm still feeling optimistic like going forward. Because obviously I expected this year to not be that good. I did not expect really good stats out of Justin Fields either because I knew the supporting cast was not really that good. And yes, Fields does have areas to work on. He's not the perfect quarterback we want him to be right now, but I think he's shown enough flashes to us right now that we can still be optimistic about him long term if you put a better team around him. And our draft position went up higher today too, so I cannot complain about that.
Yep. I can't help but agree. I mean, look, we are I have now had 4 podcasts in a row that practically sound the same, right?
Yeah.
This one probably Fields' worst game, but to be clear, we are still talking about a game where Fields accounted for 2 touchdowns and 1 turnover. No fumbles this time, which used to be a real problem. So,
Yeah.
he got hurt, sure, at the end, but let's pretend that was the most ghastly interception you have ever seen. He still led off the game with a touchdown strike, was accountable for another touchdown, helped lead the Bears to another touchdown on top of that, and ultimately turn in an above average offensive day, according to NFL scoring. Look, I get it. Like, we're mad. People, when teams lose games, they got to blame somebody, right? But this is a bad team that played better on defense than we anticipated against a bad offense, right? Played
Mm.
a little worse than we expected on offense against a bad defense, but still at the end of the day couldn't pass because they haven't been able to pass. You know what I mean? Like, this is a team that I know I'm preaching to my own choir because I thought this team was going to be 5-12 coming into the year. But if the Bears stay on track with where they are going, they will not only end up with a sweet defensive player, they may end up in a pick that somebody else trades a mountain to go get Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. I mean, it is
Mhm.
not as if the Bears have looked so convincing in these games that you're thinking that eventually they'll eke out a win against the Jets or somebody like that. So I
Mm.
don't know what things would look like, but right now I can't help but feel like we're watching a good quarterback playing on a team that is bad, and he's not getting the benefit of the doubt because he's never won these games before, while the Bears offense, which only just a month or two ago was bottom 5 in the NFL, has ground its way into the top 20 NFL offenses, primarily because their quarterback has his cleats sitting in Canton right now. That's not even a
Yeah,
joke. So
100%.
I mean, I'm not saying Fields is like unequivocally give him an extension now. You know what I mean? Like, we
Mm.
got to slow our roll. But if this quarterback hasn't given you some reason to be excited about what he could be going forward, remember the bar for franchise quarterback is Kyler Murray. It's not Tom Brady, right? Then I don't know what you're looking for. And I don't necessarily know what you want because
Mm.
right now the Bears are in as close of a situation as possible to probably at minimum end up where the Ravens are, right, Rashab?
Yeah.
Where even if Justin Fields never becomes a passer, right? I think he could take steps forward and reflect some of these Ravens like appearances where Lamar may be a better passer than him,
Mm.
but Lamar has next to no weapons either. And with better weapons, you could probably eke out something that looks maybe more like what the Lions did with Jared Goff when he was surrounded. I don't know. I'd have to think hard to get a comparison, but you get the idea.
Right.
Like, Fields to me seems like he's resetting the floor for how bad an offense can be, especially if you get him pieces around him. The Bears losing Herbert hurt a lot. That guy was toting the rock for 6 yards a carry, and that wasn't on accident. right?
Oh yeah.
Instead, they rode out today with a 7th-round running back that was worse than not being there at all, and they're everybody's favorite sub 4 yards per carry running back, which I love David Montgomery. That was a sweet
Yeah.
catch at the end. I might extend him for being a pass catcher, but he is what he is as a runner, and we know that, right? So I come away from this feeling exactly like I did last week. You know what I mean?
I
Like
totally get you. Yeah.
no
And
different.
it's
No
not a bad
different.
thing either. Like if you were to say before this year that the Bears were going to lose every game, not every game, but like most games by the score of like 30 to like 27 or something like that, most Bears fans would have taken that. Like at the beginning of this year, we were losing some games, but like Bears fans, or even when we were winning games, like against the Texans, we won that game
Looked
with our
awful.
quarterback playing horribly. Everybody was mad about that game, right? Because a quarterback is the future of this team. Like if you don't have a good quarterback, if your offense is not playing well, you're not going to win sustainably in this league. So even while winning that game, I feel like our reactions after these losses are still better than winning that game when our quarterback or offense was not playing that well. So you should still be happy, Bears fans. Like if you're watching this, like you should still be happy or optimistic, I should say, about the future of this team because we do have a quarterback that's playing still pretty decently with not good weapons around him. Like he's still top of the league in the last month in terms of like total touchdowns, in terms of like total yardage. And yes, you would like
Yep.
to see the passing yards increase for the for the long term, but he's making nothing or he's making something out of nothing, right? And you should be, excited about your quarterback for that reason.
Yep, I'll give out some homework, right? Like, not that I'm anybody's teacher, but Bears fans, if you want to feel better, go back and watch from what I have heard. Because one of my better friends in this, I guess, I don't know, industry, the blogosphere, is a beat reporter for the Patriots, right?
Oh yeah.
So the Jets visited Foxborough today, and I'll read out the box score. Not that the box score matters. Zach Wilson was 9 for 22 for 77 yards,
Oh
4
man.
sacks, 3 totes for 26 yards, accounted for 0 touchdowns, right?
Right.
Then Mac Jones was up, or apparently he had his own poor day. They only scored 10 points, though his box score actually looks pretty impressive, and that doesn't help my argument, right? So at 23 for 27,
Yeah.
246 yards, 6 sacks for 48,
Oh
48
my
yards
God.
lost. The
Yeah.
point is that while I understand the hand wringing, while I understand the, oh, but come on, you can't tell me that Fields is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL right now. Like, let's not move the goalposts further than they need to be. There are a lot of other teams in the NFL with quarterback situations dramatically worse than what Fields is
Mhm.
looking at. And for the
Yeah.
folks out there that are saying, how on earth can you be happy with this? It's because I don't think there are enough people that understand how much better this defense is going to get with $140 million to spend. Not all of it on the defense, obviously, but Rashab, I mean, you had a Jalen Carter plus a Deron Payne plus a Hargrave type edge rusher or a Will
God.
Anderson,
Yeah.
some free agent defensive tackles, and then another edge rusher just to buoy things up. And your defensive line goes from the worst in the NFL to pretty good. We don't need to do fanfare. You know what I mean? Where we go, and then they're
Mm.
the best defensive line in football. But they go from a massive weakness to pretty daggum good. And
Yep.
then the linebackers go from a major problem. Nick Morrow can't catch an interception today. It hurt. To, you know what? They're pretty good. And then the defense probably goes from allowing, lately it's felt like 35 points a game, just about, to allowing closer to 20. And so
Yeah.
far in the last 5 weeks, even on the bad days, the Bears have scored
We
more
have
than
scored 20.
20, and they'll get some offensive infusion themselves. So I think that talent is going to push this team up a lot further than I think people are realizing, because this is a team that isn't trying to win based on their spending, and their quarterback is keeping them in games by, I mean, gracious alive, man, but like at the cost of his own body. He's keeping them in games any way he can, and he's not all there yet. And just because he wants it so bad doesn't mean that he's perfect. Mitch wanted it really bad. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not like he's the first quarterback to ever want it. But reports coming out of the game are that the reporters are getting the chance to talk to Justin Fields. Usually you don't do that if you're in the hospital. Though
Oh, that's good.
that's
Yeah.
just like, fingers crossed as much as
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah.
I can't help feeling like one way or another, as long as Fields can stay away from major injury, which would be the next like RG3 story, the
Mm.
Bears are in a pretty good place. You said it really well, Rashab. Right here at week 11, after 4 straight losses, right? I feel a lot better than I did after that Texans win. And that's because Fields' play seems like something that if we get this and this is all we get, you know what? You can actually win more games than you'd think with that. But assuming he gets any better, right? You could win even more games because they're already scoring a lot on offense. Anything else before we let you go?
I mean, I was just gonna say if he gets even like to being an average passer right now with how good he is
Right.
as a runner, that would be an even better offense, or like that would be a top 10 offense in the NFL. And we saw in college football, he was one of the best passers in college football. And yes, that does not always translate to the NFL, but I do believe Fields does have the ability to be, a top level passer in this league, at least like a top 15 passer. And with his mobility, he could still be a star in this league eventually. So I'm still feeling happy about Fields, man.
Absolutely. If nothing else, he's got another year, right?
Yep.
Rashab, thank you so much for coming
Of
on. Where
course.
can folks find you online and what can we be looking for over this next week?
Yeah, so follow me on DWC Prods. I'm on Twitter, and if you're followed on my YouTube, it's the Windy City Productions. I have all my social media links on there. So, and this week I'll just be doing a post game reaction to this game, obviously, and then doing a prediction for the next game against the Jets. So
You've got a hype video you put out fairly recently on Justin
I
Fields,
did
right?
for Chase Claypool
Oh,
actually.
Chase Claypool. That was it.
Yeah,
Thank
he's
you.
not really done anything to like justify the hype just yet, but I'm still feeling optimistic long term.
Why not? Right.
Yeah,
Man, thank you so much for coming on. Talk to you
of
soon.
course. Thanks for having me on.
And I'll cut it there. Thanks so much,
All right.
Rashab. Seriously,
Of
thanks for
course,
coming
dude.
on.
Yeah. Love to come on whenever. Yeah. And I still have to have you on my channel too. I know I said
Please
that
do.
last year too, but yeah, sometime this year, maybe in the off season, for sure. Like
Absolutely.
come on. Yeah.
You let me know and I'll make it work. I mean,
Of course.
the funniest part about this season, man, because like I see a bunch of the comments and I'm with you, Matt Ridley. One score losses absolutely suck.
Yeah.
But there's tons of this stuff like Kilani, you mentioned like we should be happy. Like what's next? You mentioned like we'll own nothing and be happy about it, or you will own nothing and be happy about it. Like I get the negativity, but I can't help but feel like there were a lot of people that sold a bill of goods that the Bears were going to be this. I mean, you saw it, Rashab. People were out there saying they're going to be 10-7. Just watch. And it's like, I'm just watching. What happened? Like, if
Yep.
anything, I expected after the first 4 weeks for this team to continue overperforming on defense and underperforming on offense with my head in my hands, and I would have been right with anybody. But let me put it this way. All you're asking for from your quarterback, in my opinion, is that he brings something to the table that forces the defense into uncomfortable positions. Right now, Justin Fields is doing that in a way that I think is unorthodox. I don't want a running quarterback. If I got to, can I be honest? That's not my style. Like, I would prefer souped up Nick Foles, aka
Oh, yeah.
Tom Brady. Like,
Yeah.
that's my ideal game. I am a West Coast, like, preference guy. You know what I mean? It's part of why I love Patrick Mahomes so much. But that doesn't mean I can't see Josh Allen. That doesn't mean I can't watch Justin Herbert. That doesn't mean I can't see what Justin Fields is doing and not acknowledge the talent is all there. On college, he didn't do this. So he's grown into this, right? And most importantly, the flashes of what he could do are so clear to me that I can't help thinking that a talent infusion that gets him from like the 30th best supporting cast up to, what do you think, Rashab? Like just get him to
15 even?
16th, like
Yeah,
16th
16,
overall.
15. Yeah. And that's definitely possible, right? With like a top level draft pick, with all the draft capital we have, with all the money we have. Like we could afford anybody we really want if they want to come to the Bears, because we could outbid basically any other team. We have 50
pretty
plus
much.
$1 million more than the second highest team in terms of cap space. So if Ryan Poles does spend, which he should spend now, okay, now I'm not going to have an excuse for him if he does not spend this offseason, but if he does spend, this team should be looking a lot better next year.
Akusai mentions that Ryan Poles is embracing the Phelan for Jalen mentality, and I legit, Rashab, I have muttered it about Pace, about like maybe they're tanking, but it was always tongue in cheek. The Bears this season have done absolutely nothing to act like they're trying to win. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I wish I was kidding. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the only move was like trading for Chase Claypool, but even that was kind of like a future move, right? Because he's still under contract for next year, and you needed a receiver no matter what. So
Right. One thing that Jordan Silvera mentions is that he hates this scheme. I'll throw this at you, Rashab, because I know you got to go soon, and I got to go soon. I mean, we got lives. But he mentions it's a trading wheel scheme that works for those West Coast offenses or West Coast merchants like Tua. He wants Fields in a Greg Roman, Brian Dabble, Arthur Smith, Scott Turner-esque scheme. And I want to throw it at you. Like, what do you think? Do you think this scheme is all the way there, or given an offseason, do you expect Luke Getsy to basically, like, how much of the scheme do you think they came into this this year saying this is what we're going to do? And how much of this scheme do you think they've ad hoc'd since like the mini buy and have gone weekly installs, tried to talk about it during recovery days? Like, how much of this do you think is the finished product, and how much do you think of this is learning on the fly?
It's probably 50-50, right? Because even before the season started, they said they were going to run the football as much as they possibly could. Like I remember Luke Getsy in one of the pressers, he said that the Bears are going to be a run-heavy team this year, which that's what they are this year. And I do think, like you mentioned, personnel does play into it. Like we don't, if you ask anybody across the NFL, we do not have the best pass blockers, obviously, in the NFL. We don't have the best weapons around Justin Fields, so that does play into it. But I do somewhat have question marks about how good of a passing offense this can be, right? Because right now we're just not seeing that right now. It's a lot of quarterback runs for Justin Fields. So I think the main answer is going to come next year, right? In the training camp and in preseason. Like if we're having a better passing offense, then maybe it will be sustainable long term. But I guess we'll have to wait and see right now.
Right. Derek Reeves mentions if Getsy comes out at the start of next season and says we're done with football 101, he's going to have a stroke. And I can only envision, like, I mean, we already made the change from Matt to Matt and Ryan P to Ryan P. So we really don't need any of that. But I kind of think, I don't even think it's quite 50-50, Rashab. Now, granted, I can be way too positive or pro coach, right? I thought the Bears came out with the Packers game plan. Right, that they basically tried to install as much of the Packers offense as they could get with a team that honestly, like, let's think about this, Rashab. They didn't crystallize who was actually playing until not even through OTAs. Like they had to get through rookie minicamp before any of that stuff was like on the table. So they were teaching a group way in like very short term. Because you got to remember, the NFL coaching cycle is such that you're going to install your offense starting in May. Or maybe not May, like March. And then you're not allowed to talk to people, right? Whereas in the second year of the offense, you can hand the playbook to Darnell Mooney on the January final meeting and say, can you give this to the other receivers? And then he can go talk to his teammates as much as he wants to. Like, you're supposed to get better year two for obvious reasons. And so I'm kind of with Cody Owen here, where I think they've installed individual running concepts. That's where we got a lot of the sweet stuff that they did over like the last couple weeks. But the passing offense in particular looks so borderline remedial that I have to think that there's an element of it being on purpose. Either that, for crying out loud, or Justin Fields has gotten so much worse as a passer that we're just like missing it. Because basic things, Rashab, like throwing an out route. I don't think we've seen Justin Fields throw an out route all year. It's not like he can't. He did it in his rookie year. I don't know where those went. But
last year, sorry to cut you off, but like last year in the Steelers game, like he had a passing performance of like 280 plus passing yards, which like we saw better passing performances out of him in the Nagy offense, but that offense was not scoring as many points as this current offense is. So like I think that they're trying to lean into the running ability of Justin Fields because that's been scoring points for them when they don't necessarily maybe want to do that long term.
Yeah. Another thing I can't help but think of. Okay, so you remember last year, because you've been on this ride just like I have, where you see what like the sane person would say, but okay, that's not fair. We as positive people would say something like, well, Matt Nagy needs to tailor his scheme to his players, or at least somebody might say that, right? Matt Nagy and his staff, to their credit, because look, we all get it. I'm not trying to promote Matt Nagy more than anybody should, but the Steelers game is a good example. Matt Nagy would call the play, whether the players could run it or not. He'd say, this is the play we're running. If you can't run it, I really don't care. Like, that's your problem. You're a professional. You know what I mean? Yeah. You could debate that Luke Getsy is in his own head about what his offensive line can and can't do. Like, there is some of the stuff that they're doing. They're moving the pocket so much. They are running play action so often. They're protecting with 7 guys and still allowing pressure against 4-man rushes. Fields won't throw like short throws, not like the bubble screens, Rashab, like slants and arrows or dragon concepts like that. He's not throwing the ball. So part of me wonders whether Getsy is just getting inside his own head on what plays his guys can run, instead of that, again, like almost stubborn Matt Nagy attitude of, I don't care if you can run it. This play will work if you do it.
Right.
So
I mean,
so do
obviously,
it.
I would prefer the second option there because we've been screaming for Matt Nagy to be designing the offense around the players he has, and like scheming the offense around what players he has. So obviously, we would prefer the Luke Getsy offense right now because it's scoring more points, but you wonder how long term sustainable that is going to be.
Right.
Obviously,
I mean, to use something that Jordan Silvera said, it's really telling to me that Getsy was rattled. Like, because I agree with you, Jordan. I said the same after the game. Getsy was in particular rattled if all he could come up with in that final drive was, let's just run a quarterback draw, right?
yeah,
Twice. I mean, up the middle, no less. That was ridiculous. And so I think it's all going to be a work in progress. I think that there's a lot that changes. I mean, hey, you know what, Rashab? There's a joke to be made here about whether it's off of holding or not. Why would a Packers assistant understand what to do without a good offensive line? Right?
yeah,
Like the Packers offensive line has been
that's
awesome
true. That is true.
forever. So you could make a case that
Yeah,
Luke Getsy will have a better understanding of how to operate the offense when he has not Michael Schofield playing. You know what I mean?
for
Where
sure.
is Tevin Jenkins? I don't know. But
Yeah.
we're just waiting. We said coming into this season, if we could sim it, it might be better that way, didn't we?
It
And
would, yeah. Especially now, I wish we could sim the rest of the year because, especially with Fields, probably heard. I don't know what's gonna happen with him. I mean, you didn't mention that he's like he didn't. He talked with the media, right? So he
I
should
think so.
probably be fine. Might be out for a couple weeks. Who knows?
I'm not gonna lie, there's a sick part of me that just wants 2 more weeks. If I had to trade, right? If I had to make a deal with God where he would let Justin Fields play next week against the Jets because the whole playing his quarterback like his quarterback peers is always funny, and then play the Packers, and then he had to sit the rest of the year,
Yeah,
I'd love it. You know what I mean?
that would be nice. That would be nice. I do want to see us be competitive with the Packers this year, which I don't know if that's gonna happen. But with how bad the Packers have been, maybe.
I mean, isn't it funny that like I can literally point at Christian Watson and say like
Yeah.
it's his decision. I mean, if Christian Watson keeps going off, the Bears cannot compete or like they can't compete with the Packers because
Yeah,
Christian
that's
Watson's that
true.
dude.
Yeah,
But
he is.
you know, if Christian Watson has another game where he spends the whole game in the medical tent or where he
Yeah.
drops the ball a couple too many times and Rodgers stops throwing to him, yeah, the Bears can compete with the Packers. That team's not very good. I mean, it's bizarre, Rashab, because I do think that the Bears' ability to offensively confuse and confound anybody in the league has convinced a lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with this if you've thought there. I thought this myself. The Bears are just as good as the Dolphins. We just barely lost to them. The Bears are just as good as the Cowboys. We hung 29 on that defense. The
Yeah.
Bears' offense right now is a gimmick that's working, but a gimmick all the same. Their defense is still just flat out bad. And so they're not, I think that they're an overperforming team, which we like, right? Like that's a
Oh yeah.
good thing.
Right.
But they're one of the worst teams in football, and their record is saying they're one of the worst teams in football, despite the context suggesting smarter things going forward. This is how the Bengals fans felt after Burrow got hurt. Let's just take the win. You know what I mean?
That's true. That is true. And it got them Jamar Chase. So there you
Mhm.
go.
Exactly. You get a Jalen Carter and he goes off and everything changes. Now you get a Solomon Thomas and he does not go off and nothing changes. But we'll have to see. I mean, you maybe the Will Anderson. From what I hear from people who know better than me, Will Anderson is the next Bosa type. And if the Bears look, I know everybody's going to want to trade down, but if the Bears are in position to get one of the best edge prospects in recent memory. Like I've heard him described as a better prospect than Myles Garrett, Rashab.
Oh, same
Like,
here. Yeah, last year he had an insane year. This year it's been a little bit less than last year, but he's still one of the best prospects in all of college football, obviously.
it,
So
and if the Bears can get that at edge, like you tell me, how else do they get one? Right? Like
yeah.
if they're winning a solid amount of games, you know what I mean? How else do the Bears get an edge rusher but to take him this year? So
Mhm.
we'll have to see. But they got a lot of cash to spend. Either way,
They
anything
do.
I know you already plugged, but anything you want
Yeah.
to plug before we go?
Not really. Just follow me at the Windy City Productions on YouTube, and yeah, that's
Do
it.
it
Thanks for having me on. Obviously, it was a
anytime.
fun time. Yeah,
You let me know.
of
Perfect.
course.
Bears fans, catch you soon. You guys have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you on Tuesday for the All 22 stream. And until then, bear down. Thanks so much for bearing with me.